Now, Focus today takes us to Japan, where people are literally working themselves to death. Death from overwork, it's known as karoshi in Japanese, is a problem for 1 in 5 companies. Now, that's according to the first government white paper on the subject. The paper released last month shows that about 200 people die from karoshi every year, mainly from heart attacks, strokes or suicide. Well, now the families of the victims are fighting for proper recognition that karoshi is a serious threat to the health of the nation's workforce. Well, our correspondents Justin McCurry and Orphalie Giamataris went to meet them.
Emiko Teranishi could walk to the health ministry with her eyes closed. Today is her 28th visit in 30 years, part of the work she does as the relative of a karoshi victim. Today, as on other days, her demand is simple, that the ministry recognise 19 deaths as karoshi.
The government has decided on the criteria for karoshi, but many people who don't meet these criteria are still dying from overworking. Thank you very much.
Her organisation has helped about 20 families a year since it was founded in 1989. Each case is a long legal battle. During the months it takes for cases to be processed, Teranishi and her colleagues take their message to the streets.
The Labour Standards Office should require companies to keep a record of the working hours of their employees. This is one preventative measure against karoshi that could be introduced immediately.
Japanese law allows employees to work a maximum of 40 regular hours a week. Unions can approve overtime hours, but those extra hours are not always recorded by employers. Employees at 1 in 5 firms regularly clock 80 hours of overtime a month. For Teranishi's husband, the mental and physical demands of excessive overtime became too much. He committed suicide after working 14 hours a day for 10 years.
In Japan, people think that they will be liked more if they work longer hours, that they are showing how motivated they are by surviving on very little sleep. We really need to change this bad mentality in Japan, or things will never improve.
Japan's brutal working culture is the cause of about 200 karoshi deaths a year. Most of the victims suffer heart attacks, strokes, or take their own lives. 2 years ago, the Health Ministry formed a special unit to counter the rise in karoshi, but it's had little effect.
Measures designed to reduce overtime had been delayed. For 25 years, companies were worried measures would make them less flexible, but excessive overtime stops women from pursuing a career, so we must address it.
As part of the campaign, the Health Ministry organises meetings to educate the public about the risks posed by karoshi. Nobuko Koike travelled 250 kilometres to attend this meeting in Tokyo. In March 2015, her son became another victim of karoshi.
People must understand that my son committed suicide because of his working conditions. His manager harassed him even though he was a very hard worker. His death must be recognised as work-related. People need to know what happened to him to prevent it from happening again.
People attending the meeting hear about several tragic cases. This woman describes how her daughter, a young employee at the advertising company Dentsu, committed suicide as a result of the stress brought on by overwork. Her case made headlines in Japan and around the world.
My daughter told me, I'm coming home at the end of the year so I can spend some time with you. But she committed suicide on the morning of Christmas Day. She left me a note that said, I love you, Mum. Thank you for everything. But life and work are too hard for me.
To prevent a recurrence, some companies have been shocked into action. At this tech firm, for example, the manager makes sure that all employees have left the office by 6 p.m.
You've worked too many hours today. I'm sorry to bother you while you're working, but we must respect the rules.
Once a month, all the employees must write down what time they intend to leave the office each evening. It forces them to realise that they spend way too much time at work.
It's the first time I've worked extra hours. I feel embarrassed to have been found out.
Since the measure was introduced 4 years ago, the firm has reduced overtime by 60%, yet increased its annual turnover by 30%.
Employees can leave earlier now. They have more free time and can spend it with their families, which increases their motivation to work.
The government plans to ban companies from paying overtime, but it'll apply only to employees on higher salaries. The idea is to link salaries to performance rather than time spent at work. But the new law isn't expected to pass until next year. In the meantime, Japan's workers continue to clock up lots of overtime, sometimes with tragic consequences.